This material is made available to you by or on behalf of the University of Melbourne under Section 113P of the Copyright Act 1968. It may be subject to copyright. For more information, visit the University Copyright website.
Hello, well, welcome to the next session of the World of Engineering Management. This is session 5. And what we are going to do today is build on the message that we were discussing last week around measurement and structures in organisations, and following the break we're going to then look at a fairly intense session but analysing the simulation that we held in session 3. You remember that day in the Pelham Theatre where we created a simulation and created a lot of mess and got some data, had to think about what it meant, and today is very much about teasing out some of those important messages from that simulation. So let's continue with the material. You have the PowerPoint slides on at LMS, and we'll work through these and we're going to look at a video in a moment that completes this little session on structures and measurement. So in our last session we were looking at the importance of performance measurement as what we call a depth lever. This is simply a way of saying that measurement is a powerful management tool that allows us to build cohesion, build alignment within our organisation, our engineering organisation, so that we connect the senior management, the broad corporate business objectives and measures to the frontline people, job performer level. And we call that a depth lever, as distinct from a breadth lever, which is a different ball game altogether. So the basic objective here is using measurement, performance measurement, organisational performance, as a way to bring about organisational alignment. And alignment is again where, I remember even in our winning wheel model, we had one element in there, didn't we, called perfect alignment. And whilst we acknowledge that perfection is impossible to achieve in a complex organisation, any organisation for that matter, it's a very valuable concept that as long as we keep trying to achieve alignment, then we're well on the way to business success. We don't have different people, different structures, different departments, different parts of the organisation pulling against one another, but we're trying to align the organisation in this sense. In the context of processes, which is underpinning this material that we're talking about in this session, I think a good model here is to understand that through the vision and mission, words we've used quite frequently in the past, we want to make that sensible and meaningful and measurable, a way that we can all agree and accept that we are driving our organisation in the right direction through appropriate measures. In the management world, we call these key performance indicators. Well, guess what? Another three-letter acronym, a KPI. And you probably have come across that word frequently. It's very often encountered outside the field of management as much as inside it. So the vision and mission needs to be broken down into some key objectives. So, for example, if our objective is to improve profitability or to improve return on investment or to improve some other aspect of the organisation at a macro level, then what does that mean in terms of objectives? Does it mean, for example, we need to improve customer service? Does it mean we have to eliminate waste? Does it mean we have to be innovative and find new products? Whatever it is, that's the next level. And in between the vision and mission and the objectives is where these key performance indicators sit. And it is those that are the starting point for cascading the performance measures deep in the organisation. A bit of management terminology and definitions. Having got objectives, then we need to develop some plans. Just having the objective in itself is insufficient. We have to identify specifically a plan to take us there, and those plans are broken down into activities. Tasks and aspects of the organisation that we will need to embark on if we're going to achieve the objectives and hence the vision and mission. From those activities we can develop discrete measures. So can you see we have key performance indicators at the macro level, discrete measures at the lower level in the organisation. And these measures often sweep across the functionally based organisation, as we discussed in our previous session. And interestingly, at the bottom, if we can measure the appropriate activities, then the objective is not just to manage the process, end of story, but it is to use those measures to then understand how we might standardise the process. And that word standardise means that we build a set of practices, of activities and discrete documented aspects of the process that we can repeat again and again and again. They become standardised, they become repeatable. And so, interestingly, some people argue that the first step towards improvement in an organisation is to first standardise your processes. If they're not standardised and repeatable, and we're doing the same task in and out throughout the timeline, then we don't tend to get the power from continuous improvement if those processes aren't first standardised. So alignment comes through measures and at a macro level key performance indicators. It's just on this point, understand that, if I may, that when we talk about performance measurement, there is a difference between measurement and management, performance management versus performance measurement. Measurement is really a relatively small part of the performance management system. So performance management systems are more about the development of people, the personal objectives of the organisation and the individuals, and we need to have built around that feedback mechanisms, review activities, promotional activities that are a much broader context than performance measurement. So appreciate performance measurement, yeah, but to actually use and get the power from standardised processes and key measures, we really have to think broadly about some of those human resource issues, the training, the induction, the development, and those softer aspects of the organisation. So just slamming in a set of measures is really not the end. If anything, it's just the beginning of the change required to bring about alignment through measurement. So another way of viewing this connects, I think, very nicely with our previous material when we were looking at the differences between strategy formulation and strategy execution. And this is in fact a model, and I really like those words. It's about cascading, and you see a cascade, waterfall, top, through, down, ultimately at the bottom. It's called a cascade. And the challenge is, how can we break down this mission and vision and make it meaningful? The developers of a particular tool we are now going to look at in a little detail people called Kaplan and Norton, and we'll see a video of these two guys in a moment, expressed this gap in an interesting way, quite consistent with what we have talked about previously. What they have observed in their studies of American organisations is that a gap exists between what we have called the formulation of strategy, mission, values, vision, strategy, and some little words here try and make sense of, what is mission? Mission is our purpose and really a way of saying why we exist. We've talked about this previously in our first left-hand circle under strategy formulation. Then to decide on the values, what are important to us as an organisation in the way we work together and what we believe in. A vision, paint me a picture, a vision of what we would like to be. What is it we want to look like in the future? Describe that future state. Words and pictures by all means. And then from that vision, having identified a gap in our operational area, is then to develop a strategy. A strategy, as I said, is really a big management word that is about saying, well, what's our game plan? What's our secret? How will we compete? Are we going to compete on the basis of reducing costs or performance enhancement? Are we going to look at enhanced customer service or innovation and new products? The strategy is really a way, as I've said, of defining how we're going to be different from the competitors. We don't want to be the same. Otherwise, we're just forever in a competitive environment, and the question is who leapfrogs and who outperforms in that industry. So the strategy is a bit secret. We don't want to publicise too much what the game plan is because it might give away some ideas to our competitors. Nevertheless, we've got to have this vision or this game plan that we have got to this point having looked at the mission and vision. And these top four layers are really what we defined in strategy formulation. Now, what's interesting is, and in particular in this model, is that yes, there has been no shortage of ideas, of management theories and concepts that are about trying to improve the organisation. And we talked about these in our session last week when we talked about the management fads. Remember those three-letter acronyms? And in the absence of knowing much about these, the people at the operational level have almost sort of grabbed at these ideas. This is sounds great, it sounds sensible, maybe this is the silver bullet we've been looking for. Maybe if we tried to do total quality management, TQM, or maybe if we tried to do other ones of those three-letter acronyms, then maybe that would help us to improve the organisation. And having done that, then we can get down to more of a level of how can we really empower our workforce and how can we create good measures. And notice the emphasis is on what the individual needs to do. That represents a sort of full cascade. Now, on that point, it's interesting that the total quality management message has been around for decades. In fact, it was originally created by a management consultant called Deming, and in it, he suggested a set of business fundamentals that he figured were a roadmap for any organisation to follow if they want to improve quality. Each of you, I'm sure, would have a different definition of what that word quality means. Is it about defects? Is it about customer service? Is it about right first time? What is quality? That's a debate for another time. The important thing is here that people grabbed for these ideas in the absence of understanding what was happening at the top floor and thought, well, gee, TQM sounds interesting, it's relevant, and why don't we try and put that in and start doing some things? Well, little wonder that because it wasn't directly connected to what senior management had formulated as a game plan, management got a bit disenfranchised with the movement. I said, you know, we've been playing around with TQM for quite a while. We're not really getting the radical results. We might have, let's grab for something else. Let's go and look at what BPR might do for us. So TQM gets replaced by BPR and so on in the absence of this. Kaplan and Norton were clever enough to understand that this gap existed. And so what they did was come up with a system, a concept that filled the gap between mission, values, vision and strategy. And you see the little two sections in here called the balanced scorecard. From balanced scorecard, we can create strategic initiatives. In other words, what are the key drivers? What are the key components that we must initiate and commence in order to connect with our strategic, our strategy or game plan? Now, can you see? Wow, we've now filled the gap. We've now got a complete waterfall. The problem's pretty much gone away, and it's really through this technique, this concept called the balanced scorecard, that this has been allowed to happen. And I think there are three words there that are really so important in this model of measurement and the scorecard. The first of those words are translate, focus, and align. Clever words, powerful words. Translate simply means translate the language of top management into words that people deep in the organisation can understand. We talked about that briefly last week. Focus means instead of trying to do everything, if we're trying to improve, instead of lighting fires all over the place and trying to do too many things, let's focus on the significant few. We call that in the management world Pareto principle. Pareto. And some of you may be familiar with this principle. Pareto was an Italian economist who in the 17th century discovered that 80% of the wealth of Italians was held by 20% of the people. And forever since that simple message, Pareto has been embodied in the language of management as the Pareto principle. What it translates to is something like 80% of our profits come from 80% of our profits come from 20% of our products or from our customers. And it's this concept of trying to identify significant few from trivial many, the Pareto principle. Often we get caught up in trying to manage and deal with the trivial many rather than the significant few. I hope I'm making sense there, but you might think about your own experience, and a way of handling complexity, particularly in the business environment, is to just as a rule of thumb, do some analysis, do a bit of quantitative investigation into a problem, and you will probably find that most of the problems are attributed to one source, or maybe two. This is the 80-20 principle. Pareto, 80% of the wealth held by 20% of the people. Still applies today, probably. Now, so that's what we mean by focus. Focus on the significant few that have the biggest impact on delivering our game plan. And as we have seen previously today, how can we use measurement to align the organisation? We don't want the organisation spreading out all over the place. We want people all aligned, singing to the same sheet of music, all understanding, at least at the macro level, what is needed for them to be able to contribute towards delivering the strategy. So Kaplan and Norton, a balanced scorecard, said, how about we develop this and apply it as a way of overcoming this gap that exists in many organisations. And most importantly, look at the level here, look at the outcomes. If you fill this gap, we get satisfied shareholders. Remember the stakeholder model of the organisation, of which satisfied shareholder was one stakeholder? We get delighted customers. Delighted, not just satisfied customers, they're actually delighted. Delighted is really a much more extreme customer reaction than satisfied. You know, if you're a satisfied customer, well, you don't really tell too many people. That's what you expected. You've got the product, you've got the service you wanted, and you're satisfied. Would you class yourself as a delighted customer? I'm afraid to say in the Australian context, and I suspect that many other nationalities, customer service tends to be something that's taken for granted. And so we must strive to go beyond just satisfying customers to making them delighted. They then become advocates, champions of the organisation. They actually say, you know, I had a great experience the other day. I went to try and buy a mobile phone from Telstra, and you know what? They come out with a magnificent solution. It's not something I fully expected, but it was just amazing what they did. They're really doing a good job. Whereas if you just go in and then get your mobile phone and you come out getting, I've got a mobile phone, you won't tell anyone. The opposite, and the unfortunate part of that spectrum is a dissatisfied customer. Yeah? Someone who's had a bad experience with any organisation, and I'm sure we're all familiar with it, and we have many examples, don't we, of organisations that we have really not had a very memorable experience with. Probably call centres are one of the classic examples. You know, when you want to speak to someone in an organisation, you know, I had a need for an insurance claim not so long ago, and I think I ended up making at least 6 or 7 calls to try and get to someone I could talk to. I was really forced to follow their system online. The system wasn't really compatible or conducive to me solving my problem, and I felt like I was getting pushed around from one department to the other. People said they'd do something and never did. That insurance claim related to a new camera, which I dropped, and I think I put the claim in way back in, in November of last year, and I got a new camera to replace the old camera that was damaged only 2 weeks ago. Nearly 3 months lead time, 3 months from when I submitted my claim to when I got the camera. I'm not happy with that. I'm certainly not delighted, and I'm certainly happy to talk about it. And statistically, I can remember some customer service people informing us that if you have a bad experience with an organisation, the normality is to tell about 9 other people on average. Yeah, so think about that. We're spreading the bad message about an organisation if we were dissatisfied. Of course, that's all different now in this age of the internet. There are a couple of interesting websites. One I remember and I sometimes look at is www.notgoodenough.com, and this is a website where people can complain and lodge an issue with an organisation, and of course it goes viral and social. So the multiplier effect is nothing like 7, 8 or 9, it's 7, 8, 9,000. And so the power of customer service, or the disenfranchisement and disenfranchising that comes from a bad experience is huge. The multiplier effect is thousands. And I know several executives who the first thing they do of a Monday morning is log in there and check that there's no complaints there. I lost my bags on Qantas, and well, everything gets panicky because they know that's going to go viral. So now the customer has a dominant impact on the organisation performance, and importantly is this issue of trying to make them delighted and not just satisfied. Now, the next outcome is if we make this connection with the balanced scorecard, we can get very close to creating efficient and effective processes. And we've already talked about the importance of that, effective and efficient processes. And I like this one. The final dimension is a motivated and prepared workforce. In other words, people are contributing, they understand how they can make a difference to the organisation, assuming we have the right people, and importantly, they're prepared. We're talking about a strategic initiative here, a new game plan, and hopefully these people have been trained and communicated clearly about what's coming, and we have got those people prepared. So you can begin to see perhaps that here we have now a connection to the stakeholder model of the organisation. Yeah, we've got shareholders, we've got customers, we've got processes, which is effectively our suppliers who are part of our core process, and we have a people dimension, learning and innovation. So a very nice and I think pretty smart evolution from a simplistic stakeholder model of the organisation to a much more powerful measurement system that generates the very sorts of outcomes we're looking to deliver. So let's just take a few minutes here to look at what this balanced scorecard looks like and what it consists of. Now, a balanced scorecard is really just a way of, as we've said, of translating this vision and strategy into performance measures, including outcome measures and performance drivers. Now, outcome measures, of course, are things that have happened, and we can quantify those. We can measure things that have already happened. We can count things, we can measure things, we can create dimensions around things, but performance drivers is a little bit more difficult. Performance drivers are really saying, yes, we want these outcomes, but let's try and get ahead of that and understand the drivers, the creators of good outcomes. And therefore, the balanced scorecard is more than just a performance measurement system and connects very nicely to the stakeholder model of the organisation. It's a sort of a way to focus on these operational measures, and it consists of, at a deeper level, different features. They're fairly broad but quite powerful. It's called the balanced scorecard, emphasis, bit of this, bit of that, because it allows us to identify both short and long-term objectives, so it has a timeline to it. It allows us to measure financial and non-financial measures, and it allows us to look at lead and lag indicators. This is an important message. Lead and lag indicators. Can you imagine trying to steer a ship through the ocean by looking at where you've come from, looking over the stern. You're captain of this huge ship and you're looking behind you saying, I'll use what's happened in the past to drive my ship into the future. So the difference between lead and lag is essentially trying to identify the predictive lead indicators, trying to measure the future, if that makes sense, as distinct from measuring the past. The past, the lag indicators are important, but it's much more important that we have some idea about what we're going to measure now that will guarantee the future performance. And it's also a way of measuring internal and external perspectives. And that's simply a way of saying, if I may draw this pyramid, our organisation, this is us, we have internal perspectives, that's what is happening inside our organisation, versus external, which is what's happening outside. And clearly customers sit outside our organisation. Internal are things we own, we can do, we can fix. And this is not unlike what we've talked about in session 2. Remember, looking out, looking in. Similar concept. Look out, look beyond the organisation, and then look in to see what we can build and create internally to deliver these powerful outcomes. So the balanced scorecard has what we call four perspectives. And these are the financial perspective, customer, internal, and it's called learning and growth. It's about that people dimension. Have we got a workforce that's prepared and motivated moving into the brave new world in the future? I like the emphasis on customer. As we've said, customer, key stakeholder, more and more important in the organisation to be able to satisfy and delight our customers so that we achieve substantial outcomes organisationally. So here is a more succinct picture of a balanced scorecard. It really provides us with a microscope, with a lens, allows us to look inside the strategy in far more detail. And so this is really an example of what a scorecard would look like. It's made up of the four perspectives, of financial perspectives, which is really a way of saying how do we look to our shareholders, right? That's not how do we look at the shareholders, it's how does the shareholder see us? What's important to them? How do they see us? So how do we look to shareholders? The internal business perspective, the second of these perspectives, talks about processes, and it says, what is that one, maybe two, core business processes that we must excel at? We have to be world class at it. We have to be constantly seeking ways to improve it. And a way to start this is to at least spend some time clarifying what that core business process is, if we can't already define it. Next one, innovation and learning. Can we continue to improve and create value? And if so, what do we need to put in place? And then most importantly, how do customers see us? There's a saying, is there not, that puts yourself in the shoes of the customer. Imagine you are the customer if you're trying to improve your organisation or your operations in an engineering sense. You might be in the contract business and you have a contract to deliver certain things to a builder or another external user. What do they really think about us? How would they look to us, and what do they really think about us? And really that arrives from a strategy statement that feeds back into the scorecard, and importantly, it actually gives us a little bit of feedback as well. If we apply this, then we may need to come back if we're not adequately performing in these areas and maybe revisit the strategy. We talked about that in the session earlier about top-down versus bottom-up strategy development. Balance is about then, as we've said, the drivers of performance balanced, the outcomes, the result of these drivers also balanced and measurable. And in each of these perspectives, you can see the outcomes on the left, the drivers on the right. And we would, in each of these perspectives, try and fill out this little picture that says what are our goals and what are our measures. Now, there's a difference between a goal and a measure in the management dialogue, which is an important distinction, because in the case of goals, they tend to be quantitative. Like, let's take customers. What are some of those goals? Well, maybe a simple goal would be to improve customer service, because that's a key part and one of our strategic imperatives. The Pareto principle, we must continuously strive to delight our customers, so it's important that we measure customer satisfaction. So we want to improve customer service, quantitative statement. Okay, how are you going to measure that is the next step. How would you measure customer service? Well, many different opportunities. Maybe we could agree to measure, or to measure our pathway towards improvement through measuring and counting the number of customer complaints. Yeah, if we're not getting them, then let's get feedback from our customers. Let's search for and get that valuable information and quantify it. Measures. So the goal, fairly quantitative, the measure, very qualitative, and the measure tends to be much more impactful, measurable, and quantifiable, and something that we can then manage. Now, in a fully blown scorecard, such as this, which is a very visible wall chart, we talked about visible performance management systems recently, and a classic example would be the scorecard. There's another box over here. I won't go into it on this diagram, it's a bit busy for you. But there's another box here called targets, right? Goals, measures. Then I've introduced another box called targets. Improve customer service through reducing the number of customer complaints, and the target would be something like to reduce customer complaints by 30% between now and December the 31st this year. Now we have a timeline. Now we have a fully blown perspective of goals and measures and targets. Some people, and I know some of you are already familiar with this acronym of SMART: objective, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound, SMART, and that's a useful rule of thumb to make sure we've thought very clearly about this importance. And this might all sound a little bit detailed, and it is, but just let me reassure you that the benefits from this effort to think about these in the planning phase generate magnificent results when we come to implement the scorecard down the track. So another example of what this would look like, a similar model, 4 perspectives, a big wall chart, visible management, charts, diagrams, all sorts of quantitative data being displayed. And I've just put here just a few examples of some of the measures, or some of the aspects that might sit within each of these particular perspectives. Not for you to remember this in detail, but just to get a feel for some of the important measures that we might want to put in place here, and some objectives and targets. You know, we might measure, for example, innovation and learning through a staff attitude survey. Let's ask the people, as we did with our radar map in the winning organisations model. We might try and measure the number of employee suggestions we get per annum, how many ideas come from our frontline operators, which is a measure of their commitment and involvement at the shop floor level, and so it goes on. Customers, ranking, measurement, satisfaction. Internal might be return, safety, lead time type measures, and process effectiveness and efficiency. Financial perspective are there for you to read. So, this is a little bit of the scorecard. On LMS, there are several articles I put there that elaborate on this model. I encourage you to use these for your own personal review and further understanding of this important technique. I've tried to summarise some of the key benefits here, which is a bit of a coalescence of those articles. Managing strategy, not just developing it, but actually making it happen. It allows us to organise a key performance indicator reporting system. It helps us to significantly reduce busyness, trying to do too much into the significant few, a la the Pareto principle. And it's about managing that continuous improvement activity that occurs very much at the frontline operator level. Collectively, quite a sweet and powerful set of uses of the scorecard. Now, at this point, let's take a look at this video by Kaplan and Norton. This is, I accept, quite an old video, but it's important because I think it crystallises the starting point, the fundamental message that I want to get across to you about what it is, and in particular how it can be applied to real organisations. So Kaplan and Norton, the developers of this technique, have put this video together to inform people wide and large. The video contains two case studies. One is the rock water organisation, an underwater sea organisation that lays pipelines in and around the United Kingdom, and another organisation in the States, the FMC Corporation, that digs lithium ore out of the ground and converts that into a whole lot of end products for a very diverse range of industries. The first is really about why they tried to implement the scorecard and Rockwater case, and the second, FMC, is how they went about implementing this. So that video is an important one, and I have a couple of activities for you. Dorito, we have enough time to just put these on the board. And as you view this video, I'd like you to reflect on these few questions. Yeah? You're okay to keep going?
Yeah.
Good. Question number one is, what is the essence? What's the key message of Rockwater's strategy? Rockwater changed from something to something. And what was that key change as defined in their new strategy? Tell me what that is. Number two, what benefits did Rockwater expect to get from implementing scorecard. These incidentally are engineering, construction, fabrication type organisation. Very technical, so I like this particular case studies. Incidentally, an acronym, right? 3-letter balanced scorecard. Number 3, how did rock water get its measures? In the customer and financial perspectives. And a final sort of tricky question is, what were the strategic linkages they discovered between the categories? Okay, so here are the 4 questions I want you to reflect on. You need to think about these before the video, obviously, and then at the end, I encourage you to jot down some notes, a few bullet points. Use these for your own personal study. If you would like me to give you any feedback on these questions, I'm more than happy to receive them from you. To confirm your understanding of this. You may want to discuss them in your syndicate group as well. It's very much up to you. Let me just remind you that this rock water case videoed, and it's also on LMS, quite fully described, and you will find that as beneficial as well in considering these questions. So after the video, I hope you enjoy the video. It's got a lot of good messages in it, quite consistent with what we're talking about, and I look forward to hearing from you if you wish. Thank you.